All right, good evening. Let's get started. It is 5 p.m. Special City Council meeting Tuesday, July 11th. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and public were duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. Nicole, roll call, please.
Councilmember Bogosian.
Here.
Councilmember Hahn.
Here.
Councilmember Myers is on the phone. Councilmember Ward.
Here.
Councilmember Streetman.
Here.
Councilmember Popson.
Here.
Councilmember Anderson.
Here.
Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Mayor Pounds.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Tonight, after our citizens' comments, we'll hear from our city attorney an overview of the ordinance presented via the petition, understand the legal and statutory requirements of the petition and the options available to the city, and answer any questions from council. After citizens' comments tonight, it's council's time to work through the issues, ask questions for clarity, and ensure an understanding of the information that's been presented. During this time from the audience, I would ask for quiet, to be respectful, and please avoid any outbursts. I understand this is a high energy topic, so I would ask you to let council please do its job while we ask questions, state opinions, seek clarification while deciding the course of action. The Municipal Association of South Carolina in 2021 started a program aimed at restoring civility in local government as a top priority. The association has since used civility as a key theme among speakers, workshops, and other materials to help leaders listen, learn, and de-escalate heated situations. They even went as far to create a civility pledge. And I'd just like to read that to you, and hopefully we can use this as a tenor for our conversations tonight. I pledge to build a stronger and more prosperous community by advocating for civil engagement, respecting others and their viewpoints, and finding solutions for the betterment of my city. So Nicole, let's move into citizens' comments, please.
Tony Santiago.
I want to thank the council for giving me the opportunity to speak. I want to confront a couple of things that I've seen recently and heard. While I'm a free market.
Tony, just pull that up to your mouth.
Sure.
Please.
Could you
Any better?
state your address, please?
Excuse me?
Address, name and address.
Tony Santiago, 60 Ocean Point. Doesn't count for my 3 minutes, does it? Does it? All right, so free market is going to solve all problems. I've heard it. I'm a free market. I love it. But it doesn't solve all problems. And the invisible hand doesn't actually work by itself as much as you would love it to be. If that was the case, we wouldn't have government intervention. So we are a mixed economy. We are comprised of a free market economic system which allocates capital better than any other system in the world. But we are also have government intervention to protect the public good. It is your job as council members to do just that, balance the two. And that's what the short-term rental limitation is, to balance the two, just like the PRD in 1975, PRD with Wild Dunes was to balance that. This island cannot handle more development. We still come to grips with, we have two entrance points. We've said it a million times. They're not getting any bigger, but the number of people using them is growing dramatically. Will we see corrections? Yes. You're starting to feel it already. I said this last year, there will be a correction. The limits do not hurt STRs. They simply put a cap to protect the public good. That's what their role is. Those of you who are here were elected to do that. I hope you think about this carefully. STRs will come and go, but without a cap, they will oscillate much higher and drop much lower. That is the problem. When we have our economic corrections, people who have less short-term rentals will have less issues. We don't want to eliminate it. We don't want to take them away, but we need to balance this, and it will protect us as we go through the economic turbulence we're going to be coming up to. This is your opportunity. The public has spoken. You challenged us. Once again, you challenged us on the PRD reforms, so for the ordinances. We packed this room and we put them in the halls. You have a packed room again. You said the referendum was yours to do. Well, it was done. We almost doubled the amount needed. We did it without a lot of cooperation from behind the gates. We're not allowed to go knock on doors. We're not allowed to hang folders. We're not allowed to use our community properties to get people together. It would have been much higher had we been able to. But I hope you'll seriously consider and listen to us, the citizens, again, and not backtrack on their ordinances and not stop from embracing the limitations on the SDRs that are needed. Thank you.
Carrie Hack. While Ms. Hack is coming up, please ask all future speakers to state their name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Terry Hack, and I represent the owners of Wild Dunes Resort. Thank you to the council for
Sorry, can we have your address, Ms. Hack?
5757 Palm Boulevard is the resort address. Did you want something different than that?
Well, yeah, I think we're trying to determine if people are on the island or off the island, so that's fine. That's fine. Never mind.
Okay. Thank you for your continued dedication to the important issues facing the community. I'd like to share a few thoughts that also reflect thoughts of many individuals who actively utilize their short-term rental licenses within the city of Isle of Palms. Late last year, the majority of attendees, as I understand it, at the city-sponsored listening sessions spoke out against a cap or moratorium on short-term rentals. We appreciate that the council did not move forward in passing a moratorium and want to reiterate our support for short-term rentals and their positive impact on the entire community of Isle of Palms. Short-term rentals have been a part of the fabric of Isle of Palms for more than 50 years. We understand and empathize with permanent residents, yet second homeowners, STR owners, and commercial operators of condo hotels have no representation in the matter of the petition before you this evening. The language in the petition unfairly favors permanent residents and strips the rights of the property owners here on the island. We strongly oppose a cap on short-term rental licenses unless the council carves out existing condo hotels on Front Beach, I think there are 2 or 3, and Wild Dunes residents at Sweetgrass Inn. The accommodation taxes from condo hotels make up the majority of the A-tax revenue for the city. This is a critical revenue source, as you're well aware. In addition, please consider carving out purpose-built multifamily properties that have served this community as vacation rentals for decades. Wild Dunes is willing to provide effective and reasonable solutions that encourage a welcoming community for visitors and an enjoyable home for full-time residents. The unique character of this incredible destination should be preserved, and we are committed to continuing our role in making Isle of Palms a great place to visit and an equally great place to live. Thank you.
Richard Council.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Council, and I live at 3126th Avenue. I'd like to discuss a few public statements made since the petition was submitted on June 27th by some of you on council, and hope that some of you just might reconsider. After all, only one of you has to change your mind to make a difference tonight. First statement circulating that has sought to dismiss the petition is, quote, well, we don't know what the other 70% of registered voters want. Now, this council person was referring to the fact that, after all, only 30% of eligible voters signed the petition. But let's put this percentage in perspective. When this council person and others were elected in 2019, only 30% of eligible voters participated in that general election. Yet this council person sits here tonight as a legitimate council member. Should we toss this council person out just because we don't know what the other 70% of voters thought about him when he was elected? Of course not. And so I would submit that this petition is at least as legitimate and meaningful as the 2000 election that finds him and others of you on the council sitting here tonight is at least as legitimate. The second public statement made suggested that there are 3 possible ways forward by the council tonight. First would be to pass an ordinance as submitted in the petition. The second would be to quote, craft a compromise. Or thirdly, vote to schedule a referendum. Now, according to my reading of the Charleston County election law, there's no longer a place to craft a compromise. That was the duty of this council long before the petition was put in place, but it failed to do so. So now there are really only two choices. The first being to pass the ordinance as is written without substantial differences from what is already in the petition, which makes it, I believe, the best choice. Or by default, the second and only other choice is to vote for referendum date. Now, I believe a referendum would unnecessarily create animosity. It would be divisive, costly in time and money. It would also be highly unlikely to change the outcome. And why do I say that? Well, since 31% of voters signed the petition, and assuming very few would change their mind at this late point, it would require an additional 32% of voters to overturn the petition, meaning there would have to be overall a 63% voter turnout. That has never happened in the voting history of the Isle of Palms. Average turnout in general elections is 30 to 40%. Last special election, 20%. So council members, please acknowledge that there is now a legitimate, verified majority consensus, and so do what every other seaside community around us has had to do and cap STRs. Please pass this ordinance. Thank you.
Elizabeth Campson.
Elizabeth Campson, 32 Intercoastal Court. For over a decade now, when various city issues are discussed, I've heard council members and city officials alike say, this is what residents want, or residents don't want this or that. I've always wondered who those residents are, because the people I communicate with on a regular basis generally share a common perspective as to livability issues, the marina, traffic, etc. I've also wondered if various actions taken by different councils are really and truly what residents want. After this council failed to accept the 2022 Planning Commission recommendation to establish a short-term rental license cap, choosing instead to lean on the subjective input of 140 residents and non-residents at our listening sessions, and a 200+ person petition signed by residents and non-residents aimed at stopping any limitations, I thought, looks like we're finally going to find out exactly what it is residents want. You're considering the end result of that tonight. Speaking as someone who supported the effort and also walked the island with the petition, it is plain to me that there is a significant disconnect between what residents actually want and the decisions being made on their behalf by this body. Nearly 1,200 voting residents signed this petition, which was pulled before we could catch up with at least 100 more who had expressed a desire to sign. Understanding that what they see and feel in their areas, coupled with the policies being enacted by surrounding municipalities, is an issue that needs to be addressed. I was so encouraged by the conversations had and support received because for me, it served to confirm what I'd always believed to be the case. Residents want and expect to be protected from an unlimited number of short-term rentals, and this desire is completely in line with the first priority and goal of our strategic plan, reducing the impact of tourism on the quality of life for residents. A limit set at 1,600, representing 35% of all dwelling units, does this and is a gracious plenty. You failed to seize the opportunity to adopt the now completely obsolete Planning Commission recommendations. You also failed to work together to craft your own plan. And in doing so, you pushed this issue into the hands of the citizens. We returned it to you in a time frame that speaks to the urgency of the situation and in numbers I'm quite sure you didn't anticipate. The expectation now is a unanimous vote for immediate certification and adoption. When more than 30% of your electorate speak this specifically, you should listen.
Rick Horton.
Thank you very much, Council, for the opportunity to speak today. My wife, Risha, and I live at 23 Dune Ridge Lane. We've been Isle of Palm residents for 17 years, and until last year, we were in a residential neighborhood 100%. We had our first experience, with STRs last year, And we went through all of the normal problems that you've read about all the time. We had noise issues, we had traffic issues, we had trash issues, and we had parking issues blocking, okay, the cul-de-sac that we live on. So we couldn't get any emergency vehicles, FedEx, UPS, Amazon, anything else. We made multiple calls using the resources that we've been given with the law enforcement agencies. And finally, they suggested that I speak to the owners. So after 2 months, I tried to find the owner's name, had a problem, but I called up the IOP rental office and they were very professional. And they told me they couldn't release any of that information, it was private. But they did confirm to me that there was no valid rental license in place. So for the first 2 months, they operated without a license and we went through all of this. We've had problems, okay, with the rental unit. Okay, it's a very large home. Okay, and excess people coming in, lots of cars. We've had several drunk drivers who almost hit children because we have young children in our neighborhood. We also had a situation where we had 2 young kids in a golf cart hit one of our dog walkers at night. Now, from my own experience, last year, my wife woke up early in the morning and I heard her screaming, came out, and I found a man trying to get into our back door yelling obscenities. She ran away. I confronted the man. I immediately saw, okay, that it wasn't a robber. He had no hoodie on. Okay, looked like he'd been in Charleston or maybe at the Windjammer, but he was still intoxicated or high trying to break into the house. We had a little discussion. Okay, he eventually figured out that he was in the wrong place, sat down on my back porch steps for a while, okay, and then took off. I called the police, as you would normally do in that situation, and they told me what the rules are. The rules are, unless that person is on your property, they can't do a thing. I was a little bit disappointed, but I understood the rules, okay, and they told me how to address it. Now, from our standpoint, we've had to change our lifestyle. We haven't ever locked our doors for almost 16 years here. And the police told us that's stupid, and we realized that's stupid. We also had to put in a security system, which is a great suggestion. And also now my wife is very well trained and capable of handling herself in a situation should I not be around. So our lifestyle has significantly changed since the first STR on our neighborhood. Now, if you take a look at some of the problems we've had.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
I'll need you to wrap up your comments, please.
Okay. It has gone from an inconvenience, okay, to a safety issue for us. And I told my wife that as far as I'm concerned, I can no longer, based on the fact that we just had another rental, okay, on our street, just start, I can no longer protect her, okay, the way I promised her 48 years ago. So from my standpoint, safety becomes an issue with the FTRs or STRs now. So I've told her I'll do the best that I can to try to convince you that I hope that this situation never arises for anybody else. Thank you.
Thomas Schmidt.
Good evening. I don't guess I have to give my name because Desiree's already spilled the beans. My name is Tom Schmidt. I live at 50 Ocean Point Drive. I'm going to just make a couple of comments here, nothing scripted. Everybody's already made some really good points, and Tony and the gentleman just spoke. And in the end, I'm going to ask you all to please pass the ordinance. In 1971, Hollywood released a movie called Brian's Song. Does anyone recall Brian's Song? Okay. It was a story about a Chicago Bear running back by the name of Brian Piccolo, who was a white guy and formed a very good friendship at the height of his career with the late, great Gale Sayre, who's in the Hall of Fame. And they bridged this white-black gap, and Brian proved himself to be an outstanding football player as well as a great human being. And the song, The Hands of Time, written by Bergman and Bergman, carries on down. And it's a very favorable thing to look at. And here in Isle of Palms, we have Ryan's Song, which is it's actually not actually a song, it's a mantra that keeps going on and on. I saw a recent Facebook post, and the things being put forth by the real estate and commercial entities here in the Isle of Palms are just on face value, not rational, they're irrational. The continuing spiel is that the businesses are suffering if we do anything about short-term rentals. Does anybody in here know a merchant in the Isle of Palms that's suffering? How about a rental property? Is anything suffering? The only thing rental properties are suffering from now is a lessening demand because of a large increase in the number of rental properties available. In the month of June, the rental licenses again grew by 71 more licenses issued in June. Now, with this going on, I didn't get supply and demand in the first grade, second grade, or third grade.
Mr. Schmidt,
Yes,
I'll need you to wrap your comments up, please.
okay. The point of all of this is we just can't keep adding more and expecting to get more. I know greed is a wonderful thing, but at some place we got to stop. And as Peter Columba used to say, one last thing. I did learn as an adolescent, and I guess maybe certainly by high school, one thing important: you ought to dance with them what brung you to the dance. And there's 5 people on this council that don't get that. And we ask you to sign on now. Please approve this ordinance. Your constituents.
Laura Lovins.
I'm Laura. Oh, goodness. I'm Laura Lovins. I live at 5 Links Clubside Villas. My husband and I came to IOP for the first time 23 years ago. Within a few short days of being here, we fell in love with the area and made a vow to someday make this place our home. All of the cities we had lived in up to that point had been for jobs or to allow our son to attend a top-rated college prep high school. We chose Isle of Palms because it embodied everything we wanted for our final place to live. Almost 3 years ago, we did make this our final home. Perhaps that is why I am so fiercely passionate about protecting it. There are many that deride me for being the newcomer who wants to change things. The irony that is lost on all of those people is that I want to preserve the way of life that so many of you talk about so fondly. I'm trying to curtail changes that are coming from people who do not live here and have no interest in bettering or protecting our community. That is why I walked with neighbors who have lived here longer than me to get many of the 1,173 signatures for the short-term rental cap petition that is now in front of this council. We provided those interested with copies of the petition, answered questions, and made sure that everyone knew exactly what they were signing. Every person I spoke to who was willing to sign the petition said they wanted to preserve their neighborhood and community. They wanted balance. The way to protect and preserve our island community will not happen by continually looking back with nostalgia. When you do nothing but look in the rearview mirror, you're not going to see a semi coming straight at you. We can do better and we must do better. 1,173 of your neighbors and constituents have made their voices clear. They want to keep their residential neighborhoods from becoming commercial business districts. They want better and they want their council, who says they are committed to quality of life for residents, to stand up and honor their word. I'm respectfully urging this council to be forward-thinking and to move to adopt the short-term rental cap petition that has been presented to you. Thank you.
Brian Duffy.
Time's up, Brian.
Brian Duffy, 3613 Waterway Boulevard. Good evening, council. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you tonight. You know, my father always told me the only mistake you can ever make is not fixing a mistake. Now, through hard work, your residents of this island are generous enough to give you the opportunity to fix a mistake. If I were in your position, I would be grateful to them and I would do the right thing. Thank you.
Mark Mitchell.
I'm looking around the room and I don't see Bill Murray. I feel like I'm in Groundhog Day again, a movie on Isle of Palms. But I wanted to I might be a little bit unique here, that I'm not going to chide and wave my finger and threaten council members tonight, like so many other have. I'd like to begin my comments by thanking the council members Ward, Hahn, Hobson, Streetman, and Mayor Pounds for having the moral courage to demand proof of the impending corporate takeover that we were being bullied into thinking that there was going to be a new corporate takeover of our island. And thanks for not being bullied into an improper, reckless decision 3 times in the past 13 months. History will show that you are the true heroes. Just reference Folly Beach right now. I hope everybody takes a look at what's going on with the market and with the what's happened there. 13 months ago, we were in council chambers listening to the statistics from the livability department, police department, and planning department. They told us the rental licenses were in a 5-year downward trend and that noise and livability complaint stats were infinitesimal. These reports were ignored and council sounded the alarm that once again, the folks that own homes on Isle of Palms risk having their property rights severely limited. They held first reading and a vote on ordinance that would have limited the number of licenses and would have forced anyone that had a license but was not currently renting to generate at least $20,000 a year to renew their license for the next year. Thankfully, the ordinance was defeated by a narrow margin. As expected, several hundred property owners swiftly applied for rentals licenses last fall to protect the financial flexibility of their home. By November, using those inflated license application statistics, the alarm was sounded again by BIPA and other resident groups that the number of licenses had severely increased and that a moratorium on new licenses was desperately needed, or we would risk having 50% of all homes on Isle of Palms as corporate-owned rental businesses. The measure was again rejected by council, who simply asked for facts to back up the claims. Then again in February, the IOP Council was browbeaten into another vote on the same ordinance that again, among other things, forced some 200 plus homeowners who had gotten their license just to protect themselves to actually go into the rental business and generate $20,000 in revenue just to keep their license for the next year. We keep hearing that we don't want to eliminate rentals. But by continuing to push for property rights in the face of declining short-term rental statistics, one can only deduct that the actual goal is a game of limbo, where once the bar has been set, It will constantly be lowered and lowered until nobody can get under it. And I really don't know how to characterize the group of people who want to severely reduce or eliminate the ability of a neighbor to protect his or her property by generating some revenue as we head into what could be very well a serious recession.
Mr. Mitchell, I need you to wrap up your comments.
Okay.
please.
I'm sorry. Thank you. 126 Carolina, and I've lived at different addresses on this island since 1986. Only 26% of single family houses have a short-term rental license. The number of non-resident homes has declined by 84, while the number of residents has increased by 50 over the last 12 years. Again, finally, I just want to thank Councilman Ward, Hahn, Streetman, and Popson, and Mayor Pounds for not caving to the pressure. Thank you.
Folks, listen, we're not going to take this tonight. People have opinions, people have views, they can be the same, they can be different, but we're going to sit here respectfully and listen to that. Thank you.
Chrissy Kunkel.
And I'm short. Hi, Mayor, Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. Chrissy Kunkel, 327th Avenue. The home has been in my husband's family since 1987. We have lived here full time since 2010. I do live in one of the dinosaur JC Long duplexes, and I do rent the downstairs as STR. I've been to several council meetings surrounding this subject. This ordinance can have a significant impact on families. A meeting several months back, Shelley with Exclusive Properties tearfully shared her story of how during the market crash of 2008, she and her family were able to save their home because of the ability to STR it. It broke my heart because I am not unfamiliar with her story. I was a victim of the market crash. I was a general contractor in North Carolina until that happened while going through a divorce at the same time. I lost everything. Imagine going from a six-figure salary, first female president of the local home builders association, even having been to the White House a few years prior to that for a Christmas party, to making nothing. It can happen, and it can happen to anyone. I cannot imagine having the ability taken away from me to be able to do what I needed to do to save my home for me and my family. I have a friend in the upstate. He's 44 with 4 children, and cancer treatment killed his liver. He had to go to Cleveland for a transplant and was gone for months. The ability to utilize STR was insurance to save his home. These things can and do happen. What about people born and raised on this island that leave their home to their children, but the kids can't move in, but want to keep the home they built their memories in? Or for anyone for that matter who wants to leave their memories to their family to carry on, but cannot afford to do it without STR. I've heard the arguments that the petition pushers have presented. They have told people, yes, you can rent it if you need to, and yes, you can leave it to your children and pass along that rental license. But let's be clear that those statements, while are in fact, they are still less than honest, because it's been said and posted on social media that nothing changes for you, but it does. It has not been made clear that there is a 72-day rule in place to keep your 4% status, and that if they lose their 4% status, they would fall into the caps pool. Then I heard the argument that, well, nothing stops you from doing an LTR. 1, doesn't that negate the point of a family vacation home? And 2, the ROI doesn't math right to cover the expenses. I feel confident that a lot of those who have moved here started the process in stages, first vacationing here, and most likely an STR, then falling in love with the environment and the way of life, and then buying here. Now you're here and you want to shut the gate.
Ms. Kunkel, I need you to wrap up your comments.
Okay, thank you. These proposed caps are inherently selfish and unfair and go against property rights. I urge council to think about the ramifications of this and say no yet again. I also wish for those pushing for caps that they may never have a financial or medical crisis, nor anyone in their family that would require that they have to do what they have to do to save their home. This proposed ordinance is a solution looking for a problem. There are issues facing this island of more significance than STR caps. Parking, traffic, and drainage come to mind. Please vote no to caps. And can we please stop riding this horse before it falls over dead? Thank you.
That's it, Nicole. Thank you. Purpose of the meeting is discussion of petition received to limit investment short-term rental business license to a maximum of 1,600 and statutory requirements per section 5-17-30 of state law. First, I'd like to call on our city attorney, Mac McQuillan, to kind of walk through the options, the timing, the timeline, and state requirements for a petition like this. Mac?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Pounds. Good afternoon, Mayor Pounds and members of council. First, I wanted to walk you through the citizen initiated ordinance process and statute, as well as council's options as it relates to the citizen initiated ordinance. And then I want to give you an overview of the actual ordinance as proposed. So right now, I'm just going to talk about the statute that allows the citizens to do this and what your options are. So under the statute, which is code section 5-7-10, voters in a city may propose certain ordinances if at least 15% of the registered voters from the last city election sign a petition and the petition is certified by the local election commission. So the agenda item immediately following this evening is for council to consider sending the petition to the election commission for certification. We have talked with the election commission and believe this will be done in approximately 2 to 3 weeks. So we should know by the August meeting whether the petition is certified. The following section 5-7-30 of the statute governs council's options and the process of how the citizen initiated ordinance will proceed. So I want to walk you all through each of those options. So first option, city council can adopt the ordinance. This will take 2 readings. The first reading is the last agenda item on the agenda for council to consider this evening. Assuming the election commission certifies the petition, this will come before council again in August for consideration for first reading. That also assumes it passes first reading. If the ordinance is approved as submitted after first reading and second reading, it shall become law and there will not be a referendum and the issue will not go to voters at the November general election. Again, if the ordinance is approved as written at second reading, it is like any other ordinance. It can be amended or it can be repealed at any time by council. If after approval at second reading, so the ordinance gets approved, it can literally be amended or repealed even at the very next meeting or a special meeting. And again, the issue will not go to voters at the November general election. A new petition would need to be initiated by the voters and the process would start over. And there's a South Carolina Attorney General opinion and case on point on that. The second option, council, is that council can take no action on the ordinance or simply decide to let voters determine the outcome. No action by council is what happened at Folly Beach. There was no motion or second to approve or deny the citizen proposed ordinance. And if council fails to take any action, the ordinance must be submitted to voters not sooner than 30 days and no more than 1 year from the date council takes no action. The issue will be placed on the ballot during a regular election within the time frame. And if there is no regular election that takes place in that time frame, a special election may be called. The election commission has indicated that they will need at least 60 days advance notice for this to be placed on the ballot. Again, if the ordinance is approved by voters, if council takes no action, council can amend or repeal it following the election, just like any other ordinance. The third option is council can amend the ordinance. And so they're really under this third option, there's 2 parts, subpart A and B. And it deals with 2 types of amendments. So first, there's stylistic amendments and substantive amendments. If the ordinance is changed to correct a typo or merely stylistic changes that do not alter the substance of the ordinance is treated as if it was approved because it is not, quote, substantially different from what was proposed. If the ordinance is deemed approved because the changes are merely stylistic and do not change the substance of the ordinance does not get placed on the ballot and it's treated as if it was approved by council. Substantially different is the word used in the statute. Any substantive amendments that change the substance of the ordinance will likely cause the issue to be placed on the ballot in the same manner as if council took no action. And I'll give you an example from one of the public comments tonight. So if council amended the ordinance at second reading and adopted the ordinance to exempt multifamily from the short-term rental cap or some other substantive change, that would likely make the ordinance substantially different. The ordinance must be then submitted to voters not sooner than 30 days and no more than 1 year from the date council approved the amendment. So the amended ordinance adopted by council would become law until the issue is submitted to voters. If the vote passes, the original citizen proposed ordinance would take effect following the election, and the amended ordinance would essentially be amended by the voters back to what they originally proposed. If at the election, the voters fail to get enough votes to pass the original ordinance submitted, the amended ordinance that council adopted would remain the law. All right, any questions about the process before I discuss the substance of the citizens' proposed ordinance?
Matt, can you, Desiree, can you walk us through the timeline? Because we're talking about, we're going to make a decision on the first reading this evening. And hopefully, and then we're talking about a second reading in August. And I just want to read a comment when the petitioner submitted, when they submitted the petition, it says, I kindly request that the city promptly consider adoption of this ordinance. So this would be, they're asking for a vote. We have confirmed that the signatures are valid. You are welcome to submit it to the Charleston County Board of Election if necessary. If you are unwilling to adopt this ordinance quickly, we request that you take all steps necessary to have this placed on the November ballot. So there's an expectation that if this does not pass, that it would end up on the November ballot. Given the timing of our first reading, and then we're talking about a second reading in August, would we be able to, and I guess this may be for Desiree, and I just want this for information out there. Are we bumping up against the time frame if there are any other delays or deferments or what have you to make the ballot if we were to either accept or if it were to be defeated in the second reading to make the November ballot?
After the city receives a certification from the county, council can call a special meeting. The special meeting can be called by either the mayor as the presiding officer or by a majority of council. So you don't necessarily have to wait until the August council meeting at the end of the month to hear and take action on second reading. So that would be hopefully helpful for the timeline. If the concern is that a final decision would not be reached by September 8th, which is a deadline that the county would need to have a decision in order to put it in for the November municipal election ballot.
Okay, so September 8th is the date.
Yes, would be 60 days prior to the November election.
Thank you.
All right, now I'll discuss this. Yep, sure.
So let me see if I get this straight. If there is a vote tonight and the ordinance is voted down, we're not gonna have a first reading, then would it automatically go to referendum?
Yes.
Okay. If we have a vote tonight and we adopt first reading, approve first reading, then second reading we have to have a second reading to adopt the ordinance or amend the ordinance
Or reject it.
or reject it. And by that time, we're into August.
That's correct.
So the quickest way to get it onto referendum would be to vote it down.
Correct.
Okay.
If the election commission has the bandwidth to certify the petition before our July, which is a couple of weeks, I think they said 2 or 3 weeks, and it sounds like they may be able to do it by then. Could we schedule the second reading for the July meeting and then bring this to conclusion for everybody?
Yes, the only requirement in the code between first and second reading, you have to have 7 days. So as long as you're having second reading 7 days after first reading, then you could make that happen.
I will say the statute on citizen initiated ordinances does require though that it be certified. But that, I think as long as it gets certified, whether that's pre or post vote, I think you're fine. All right, so now I'm going to discuss the substance of the ordinance proposed and give you a general overview of what the citizens are proposing. So under the proposed ordinance, there are two categories of short-term rentals. One is legal resident short-term renters, and the other is investment short-term renters. I'm going to refer to these as 4% primary resident short-term renters and 6% non-primary resident short-term renters. So under the ordinance, an owner is required to have a short-term rental license if they allow rentals of 3 months or less on their property. That's how the ordinance defines short-term rentals of 3 months or less. The proposed ordinance provides no cap on short-term rental licenses for 4% primary residents short-term renters. The ordinance proposes a cap of 1,600 for licenses for 6% non-primary resident short-term renters. For example, the cap would apply to any sort of investment properties. This would include multifamily, 6% condos that are rented at 3 months or less. Under the ordinance, after its adoption, the 6% non-primary resident short-term renters have a 60-day grace period before the cap takes effect to apply for a short-term rental license. The licenses issued during this 60-day period following enactment counts towards the cap. However, the ordinance allows the city to issue licenses to 6% non-primary resident short-term rentals above the 1,600 cap during the 60-day period. They essentially get grandfathered in. So for example, if council takes no action or rejects the ordinance, it will be voted on in November, and 6% non-primary resident short-term renters will essentially have between now and through January 2024, because of the 60-day grace period, to apply in excess of the 1,600 cap. So under these scenarios, short-term rental licenses for 6% non-primary residents will almost certainly exceed the cap of 1,600. And the reason I say that is based on the current number of licenses issued this year. So I'm going to get into the current data quickly to explain, and then I'll continue discussing the substance of the ordinance. So as council's aware, the annual short-term rental license period for the city is April 30th to May 1st the following year. So last year, the license period was April 30th, 2022 to May 1st of this year. Everyone that had a license last year that wanted to continue short-term rentals on May 1st of this year needed to reapply before April 30th. Owners not currently renting, but that plan to do short-term rentals later in the year can apply at any time during the year before they start engaging in short-term rentals. The most up-to-date data we have for this year is from May 1st, 2023 to July 7th, 2023. That data is current with just within a couple of days. And before I get into the data, it's important to note that we're only slightly over 2 months into the license year, so we do expect more owners to apply throughout the year. As of July 7th, a couple days ago, there were 155 4% owners with licenses. Under the proposed ordinance, these would not be capped. As of July 7th, a couple days ago, there were 1,549 6% properties with a short-term rental license. These would be capped under the ordinance once they got beyond 1,600. As of July 7th, 51 properties are renting that don't have a license, and they've been contacted by the city notifying them that this is illegal. They have 30 days to stop or apply for a license. If they continue to rent and do not apply for a license, they will get a ticket, a $500 fine, and court costs totaling $1,097 and up to 30 days in jail. Some have started the application process. As of July 7th, there were 18 licenses pending approval, which likely includes some of the 51 that were renting without a license. I give you this information just to show that between now and January of next year, the city will most certainly exceed its 1,600 cap, especially in light of the 60-day grace period for the 6% non-primary residents to apply for a license in excess of the proposed cap. I'm about to address wait list, transferability, and penalties under the proposed ordinance. Before I do that, are there any questions about the cap, the 60-day grace period, or the current data before I move forward onto the remainder of the substance of the ordinance?
I have a question, Mac. I've read this thing a couple times and I'm not sure I'm coming to the same conclusion as what you did. So help me understand what portion of it you're getting to the 60-day grace period. Because when I read it says the owner of an existing investment short-term rental. But when I read the definition of that, an existing investment short-term rental means a short-term rental that is licensed by the city as a short-term rental pursuant to blah, 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 as of April 30th, 2023. So it's the way I read that paragraph is anybody that has a license up through April of 2023 has 60 days to apply for the license. That leaves in limbo anybody that's new that's coming forward with a 6%.
Where are you seeing the date you brought up?
It's in the definitions of existing
Got it.
investment short-term rental. And then it's the reference there is in paragraph E1.
Yeah, I see that now. Let me see the owner of an existing investment short-term. So your point is if they already have a license, they have 60 days to reapply after the passage of this
Well,
ordinance.
not-
Why would they?
And not even that, the way, I'm just reading the way it's written.
Yeah,
But the way it's written to me is if you have a license prior to April 30th, 2023, you have 60 days after the enactment of this ordinance to apply for a license. And if those happen to be over 1,600, then they're grandfathered. But if I have a new license, if I went and had a license today, then this, according to the way this is written, that would not fall within that that grandfathering clause.
I see. Yeah, based on that definition, that does seem right. That if they had to have an existing license as of April 30th, and they would just be renewing it during that 60-day period.
That's correct.
I'm not sure why they would do that though, because it doesn't expire until May of next year. But
Well, they'd already expired.
oh, it's for folks that haven't currently applied that had one prior to April 30th. So folks that had licenses last year that have not yet applied this year have a 60-day grace period. Is that
That's
right?
the way I read it.
Yeah, the way I read it is if you had a license in 2023, you have the right, according to this, 60 days, April, as of April 2023. So you had a license all through that 23 period or the previous period. You have the right to 60 days from the date this is enacted to get a license.
So everybody, yeah, that's right. So every 6%er that had a license last year
Has the right to.
has the right to apply 60 days after this ordinance is enacted. So anyone that previously had one has the 60-day grace period and is grandfathered
It's
in.
not giving anybody.
It's not everybody.
It's not everybody.
That's correct. Yep, that's right. That was a good catch. Thank you. Any other questions?
Would that be considered a substantive change if that wording were changed?
Yes. Any other questions?
Council questions, thank you.
So this, going back to the substance of the proposed ordinance, if the 6% non-primary resident licenses issued exceed the cap, then any new 6% non-primary residents, well, this is what we just went through. Let me see. Yeah, any new 6% non-primary residents that apply after the 60-day period, once the cap has been met, will be placed on a wait list based on a chronological first come, first served basis. These are currently and will be handled exclusively online so that the wait list will be supported by the submission's timestamp for determination of a position on the wait list. So let's talk now about transferability of licenses upon a transfer of the lot or dwelling, and also how that affects any 6% owners on the wait list. So in the event of a transfer of the lot or dwelling to an eligible family member, licenses generally may be transferred. The ordinance defines eligible family member as a parent, spouse, step parent, sibling, step sibling, sibling-in-law, child, stepchild, grandparent, or step grandparent. No other transfers are permitted. And so I want to walk you through each of the various scenarios, whether you're a 6%, 4% owner, and fair warning, this gets a little complicated. So first scenario, 6% owner transfers to another 6% owner that is an eligible family member. In that case, the license is transferred. 6% owner transfers to another 6% owner that is not an eligible family member. The license is not transferred and the new owner will need to reapply or be put on a wait list. 6% owner transfers to a 4% owner. In other words, it's an investment property sold to somebody that's going to live there as their primary residence, but they're not an eligible family member. The license is not transferred and the new owner will need to reapply, but there's no cap on primary residence, so the new 4% owner would get a license. 6% owner transfers to a 4% owner that is an eligible family member. The 6% license is transferred. That 4% owner could then transfer to another eligible 6% family member in the future. In other words, the ISTR or investment short-term rental license remains in effect as long as the transfers involve eligible family members. All right, 4% owner transfers to another 4% owner that's an eligible family member, license is transferred. 4% owner transfers to another 4% owner that is not an eligible family member. The license is terminated, but there is no cap so that the new 4% owner could get a license. Okay, 4% owner transfers to another 6% owner that's an eligible family member. So this is a eligible family member, but it's going from a primary residence to an investment property. So I live here in town, mom lives somewhere else. I convey it to her and she's going to continue living somewhere else. The license does transfer, but it terminates unless the eligible family member makes it their primary residence. And this is the second sentence in the ordinance, but essentially you cannot convert a legal resident 4% license to a 6% investment license, even if the transfer involves an eligible family member. All right, 4% owner transfers to another 6% owner that is not an eligible family member. The license is not transferred and the new owner will need to reapply. Any questions about transferability? A little logical reasoning there. All right, so let's talk about wait list transfers. So the wait list only applies obviously to the 6% applicants. And that would be after the 60-day grace period for the folks that had a license last year. If the transfer is to an eligible 6% family member, they hold their spot on the wait list. If the transfer is not to an eligible family member, they need to reapply and would go to the bottom of the wait list when they apply. The next section of the ordinance says that the obligation is on the seller to notify the city of any change in ownership that terminates the license. This will likely present enforcement issues as some owners may not report. In discussions with staff, one simple method to enforce the proposed ordinance and check the ownership status is when the license year expires and owners reapply, they will check to see if the ownership for the property address has changed on the application and can determine at that time whether the license transfers or not. We also plan to reach out to the county assessor's office to see how/when they check for changes in ownership for purposes of assessable transfers of interest and property taxes. I suspect they work closely with the Register of Deeds office. We could also look at MLS, but that will not show all transfers. And so we will need to explore these issues further. Finally, which is similar to the current situation now, but under the proposed ordinance, if an owner operates without a license, they're subject to a $500 fine. And then when you add court costs, the total fine amount could be $1,097 and up to 30 days in jail. I know that was a lot of info. Any questions about any of that or other substantive questions?
Is there only a single fine that a person would get who is operating without a license?
Per day.
Per day.
And that's defined in the current ordinance. Yeah. So it could be up to $500 per day. And depending on when you go to court, you get the added court cost as well.
But let's say it takes you 2 weeks to shut down, then it's one court cost plus 2 weeks of $500, 14.
Correct.
Okay.
John.
Keep forgetting. Mac, there's been some question around whether this this petition that's put forth is legally sound. And in particular, whether, you know, there's an issue whether it's part of the zoning or whether it's part of the licensing and any kind of issues that cause. What's your opinion around the legality of this petition that's been put before us?
Yes, that's a good question. So staff and I have reviewed the proposed ordinance. I do believe that it's legally valid. This is based on my reading of South Carolina case law, the opinions of other municipal and zoning lawyers that I've consulted with about the ordinance, and frankly, the extensive briefing in the Folly Beach short-term rental ordinance litigation. I do want to be clear, though, that this is my legal opinion, and this is an area of developing law, and there is not a South Carolina case directly on point. I wish there was. My job would be easy, but a court could potentially disagree. But I will say, based on the current case law, my belief is that the ordinance is valid. But all of that said, this is ultimately a policy decision that council must decide. But I think from a legal risk standpoint, my opinion is it's valid. And if somebody sought to challenge it, based on the current law, I do not think they would prevail.
Thanks.
And Mac, to John's question, what's the flip side of that?
So, yeah, so what he's getting at is at the beginning of my presentation, I said that citizens can pass a citizen generally proposes a ordinance on certain topics. So one, the statute mentions it can't be an ordinance that levies taxes, which this is not. And then two, there's a Supreme Court case, the Ion case, where there was a citizen initiated ordinance that sought to change zoning. And I don't remember the exact zoning classifications, but the citizens were trying to change something from R1 to R2 or something along those lines. And the court said, you can't have a citizen initiated ordinance that deals with zoning. And so that is one of the central issues in the Folly Beach litigation, is whether their short-term rental ordinance is a zoning ordinance or whether it deals with business licenses. And based on the cases cited by both parties, I think that Folly Beach has a much stronger argument there that it is not zoning and that it's simply an exercise of the government's police powers.
And the one that we have is that this referendum proposal is a license.
Yes, this one deals specifically with licenses, and that's one of the reasons I believe it to be valid, because it's an exercise of police powers. And frankly, I think this ordinance, whoever prepared it, I suspect a lawyer was involved, but it's a lot cleaner than Folly's as well. That's all I've got.
Other questions for?
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just one of the questions that you had answered to council anyway, based on one of our council members' questions to you, Mac. Right now, where is the legislature in attempting to block any STR limitations? Can we draft an ordinance if we chose to that would survive the current contemplated challenge? Can you speak to that a little bit?
So that legislation is supposed to be brought up next legislative session. And so I'm assuming what that legislation would say is that it repeals all the existing rules that municipalities have adopted. But I really don't know is that the question you're getting at?
Right.
And
Yeah.
If you mind me piling on, I mean, maybe this is a question for our lobbyists. If we had a referendum as opposed to a council action, and I know we're going to suppose here for a minute, because I think what has been presented at the state legislature for the last 2 years hasn't contemplated a referendum or a council action or anything. I mean, it would seem hard pressed to me that, I know the state guys can do whatever they want, but if you had a referendum and you had whatever percent turnout, that would seem to give a little more protection to your community to me. But who knows if there's going to be a carve out if you have a council action versus a referendum. Do you have an opinion?
I frankly think they'd probably be treated the same because either way, it's an ordinance.
Yeah.
And even if it's passed by referendum or council, it can always be amended, repealed, invalidated, challenged. So I think they would be treated the same.
Yeah, just seems like a tough message from state legislators to say, you know, you went to the trouble of a petition, you went to the trouble of a referendum, and we're gonna negate what your municipality may have voted for.
I think that definitely would be a political consideration that those elected to the state house would want to take into mind.
Well, can we say home rule?
You can say it.
Right.
Other questions for Mac? Desiree? Nothing for Katie. Other questions or comments from council before we move on the agenda?
So, Mr. Mayor, typically we'll make a motion and then have discussion and then vote. And as I understand it, we're not doing that tonight. And so any discussion from council needs to happen now.
You usually on first reading, it's by title only, unless we have a point of order that somebody wants to allow for discussion. So you can do it either way. We can do it now or later.
So are we on agenda item B or not?
We're on A at the moment. I'm
Okay.
just asking a question. If anybody has any more comments or questions, and Blair's just asking clarification. If he's got a comment, do it now, or are we gonna do something at item C?
I would rather make a motion now that we change the rules of order to allow for discussion at C.
Yeah. Do we need to do that when we get there, I guess, or can we just go ahead and do it now?
I think if there will be a motion to approve first reading of an ordinance by title only, and my suggestion, what we've done in the past is include in that motion to discuss, you approving by title only and discuss so that you can go ahead and discuss the ordinance that you're going to be voting on.
Okay. All right, so item B.
And B.
We'll go to next. Consideration of sending petition to the Charleston County Board of Voter Registration and Elections for certification of signatures.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion to send the resident petition to the county expeditiously for certification.
Second,
Motion and a second. Questions, comments? Katie? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Item C, consideration of first reading of ordinance by petition 2023-12 to limit investment short-term rental business licenses to a maximum of 1,600.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance by petition 2023-12. Contingent upon certification by Charleston County Board of Voter Registrations and Elections of the signatures submitted and to have discussion.
Second,
And a motion and a second. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. In preparing for this vote, I researched the reasons groups across the state have stated for why caps on short-term rentals are needed. Every single person said the same thing. Caps are needed to protect residential neighborhoods. That's the reason, protect residential neighborhoods. Caps are simply an insurance policy to protect and maintain residential areas. I had coffee with the lady that presented this petition and ordinance to City Council. She said the same thing, both to council and to me privately. This is just about protecting our residential neighborhoods. It's an insurance policy in case things get out of hand. I told her that while I don't agree that caps are needed on the Isle of Palms, given the 12-year sustained decline in short-term rentals, I understand her position. And I will support a cap on short-term rentals in residential neighborhoods. However, I cannot support this ordinance. This ordinance goes far beyond the stated goal of protecting residential neighborhoods. This ordinance is a first step to ban short-term rentals island-wide. This ordinance will limit the ability of not only condominium owners in our commercial district and Wild Dunes to generate revenue. This ordinance will limit the ability of our 2 beachfront hotels from operating. Human beings have invested in our island for over 100 years to provide a place for vacationers to stay and enjoy the beach. The condos and hotels in the commercial district, as well as in Wild Dunes, were built and intended as places for people to vacation. I cannot support an ordinance that takes away the rights of those individuals without due process, without the right to be heard. That's what this ordinance does. It is attempting to take away the rights of non-resident property owners that invested in vacation property rentals because they believed in this island and in its residents. I tried to reach a compromise with those that have promoted an island-wide cap. I was told no, all or nothing. There can be no compromise. If those individuals had agreed to limit the cap to single-family residents, the stated goal, we would not be here. We would already have an ordinance in place. The residential neighborhoods would be protected. Perhaps when all the posturing and name calling is over, we can come together as good neighbors do and cap short-term rentals in our residential neighborhoods. After all, that's what everyone says they want, to protect the neighborhoods. But for now, I cannot support this ordinance. Thank you, Mayor.
Rusty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to begin my remarks by saying that I want to again go on record, public record, that I have not been against a cap. I'm not against a cap going forward, if needed in certain areas, specific residential areas. I too feel that there may be certain areas in the residential areas of this island that we should be able to address a cap if needed. That's one reason that I voted the way I did, when we decided to monitor the situation going forward, stay close to the situation and see if there was a problem we needed to address. That's where we wanted to go with this, if it could be determined to be a real problem. As it turns out, we've had a decline in short-term rentals over the years, not an increase as some would assert. And I still continue to support monitoring this issue going forward. I think on this island, our property values are going to continue to rise over the years, even with setbacks economically. And I believe they will continue to do that because this is a great place to live, work, and play. So this island is not going to go underwater from an economic standpoint or real estate standpoint, unless we have another Hugo. Then we may have something to deal with. Anyway, that's not going to change. Because of the cost of the housing and property on this island and the limitations on the number of renters that we put in place, by the wise council that came before us, where they limited the numbers of people that could be in a rental to 12. And because of the maintenance costs that are incurred, and because of just the sheer price of any piece of property on this island, whether it be just an empty lot or a J.C. Long house or whatever, it really put it in a situation, in my opinion, that it's not a great investment that would provide the ROI needed to justify that investment on this particular island here, because of the prices that we now all enjoy with the value of our homes. In my opinion, and many others I've talked to on this subject, the condos, the townhomes, hotel accommodations, they should be backed out of the STR number because they were built and designed to be short-term rentals or long-term rentals historically. These properties also provide the revenue that contributes to our local economy. When the short-term renters come here, they frequent our business district, they go to the grocery store, they go to the shops, they go to the restaurants, they use our pharmacy when they get sunburned, and to keep our businesses thriving on the island. I dare say there may be some residents in here that hardly ever go to a restaurant on the island. They go off island or somewhere else. They don't really frequent our own businesses in some cases. I know that to be a fact. Also, the tax revenue generated by the properties, STRs, help keep our taxes low. We all want that. And help provide for the amenities we all enjoy as full-time residents. So therefore, I think short-term rentals are not the problem. The problem are the day trippers. I don't like to use that term, but it's the truth. They are the real issue. They don't do much at all to support the local economy. They bring their food, they bring their soft drinks, beer, whatever, their beach gear. All of that comes over here with them for the most part. And in some cases, unfortunately, they leave the litter behind for us to pick up at our expense. That happens also. I think we have other pressing issues that we should continue to address on this island and focus on going forward. I'm not saying this is not an important issue. It is a hot button issue and we've got to deal with it. But think about the other things that we need to be putting out there in terms of high priority. Traffic, due to the increased population of the greater Charleston area, East Cooper, the Tri-County area. We saw the numbers earlier today at the workshop. Maybe you haven't seen them yet if you weren't at the workshop, but the population is exploding. So that's putting a strain on us. So parking is an issue and how we handle that. We've seen violence, gun and drug offenses increase on this island that have had to be dealt with by our great public safety department, our police department. We've seen that litter is an issue ongoing. It's always been an issue, but it seems to be even worse now because of the number of visitors that we have to the island. And that's not caused by STRs. In my opinion, that are the visitors that come here for the day and they offload their gear and they leave behind a mess. In many cases, not all. Drainage continues to be a high priority. The Waterway Boulevard pathway that we've talked about for years. We're working on getting that fixed, but we still don't have a pathway down there that anyone could safely walk or ride a bicycle on or jog on, for that matter. I could go on and on and on. Okay, and I will. I respect the work and effort from the petitioners that have gone to that have been out there in securing the signatures needed to take this to a referendum where all voters can decide. I do respect that. And I said that publicly when this all came up. If you can go out and you get those signatures, 15% or more, fine, let's go to a referendum. So now I support us going through the process of passing along the petition to the Charleston County Board of Elections to certify the signatures. I also fully support this issue being placed on the ballot in November for all eligible voters to decide, not just a plurality. To do less would disenfranchise the majority of eligible voters on this island. I also continue to believe the 3 listening sessions we had last year clearly pointed out we need better enforcement of our livability issues, not a cap on short-term rentals. I look at our reports that we get, we have very few complaints regarding livability and noise complaints on rentals. Very few. They're not documented. They are not documented. If you've got a complaint, you should report it to the livability authorities, and you obviously are not doing that if you think differently. The ordinance that is proposed deserves to be addressed if a referendum passes, but I would hope it be scrutinized closely by council going forward, along with input from all residents and even non-residents who own property on the Isle of Palms. Their investment needs to be protected going forward and not infringe on their property rights. Finally, my family and I have lived here for 39 years, since 1984, and we've seen many changes. But even when we moved here years ago, the Isle of Palms was a destination for vacationers, short-term rental owners, and day trippers, even back then. We knew even then to stay on the island on the weekends if at all possible. Due to the traffic that was going back and forth one way over the Ben Sawyer Bridge, which seemed to always get stuck open on the weekends. And that's not going to change. We will continue to be a destination going forward, but now have 2 ways on and off, but we still are going to have the same problem we've always had with traffic. And as the population continues to increase in this beautiful area, you know, it's not going to get any better. We're just going to need to realize that's inevitable
But we need to continue to work on the real issues that bring more effective policies, more effective enforcement, and put that in place. And keep this beautiful island we all call home a great place to live, work, and play. So therefore, I will not be voting in support of ordinance, but I'm wholeheartedly in favor of the referendum. Thank you.
John.
Yeah, it's great to hear all the issues we have on the island. But I think, hold on. But the fact is, 30% of our electorate has come forward with a petition asking us to take action. And in February of this year, this council had in front of it a proposed ordinance very similar to the one that was brought by petition by the residents. And this council decided not to offer any proposed changes to it, to tweak here or tweak there, but decided by 5-4 vote to do nothing, to sit there and monitor. And I hear that the numbers haven't gone up, and I don't know what numbers everybody's looking at, but the numbers that we have, even in the packet tonight, show that in 2021, we had 1,403 licenses. In 2022, we did 1,805. I think that's close to a 30% increase in 1 year. This year, we're 2 months into the licensing season, and we're at 98% of where we were last year. So I don't know where this notion is that we've not had an increase in the number of rental licenses. The reasoning that was given by this council for a 5-4 vote to do nothing was that listening session. 140 people, of which we don't know who they were, residents or non-residents, a qualitative session that when you look at the results, depending on which way you want to end up on the side of this, you can determine the results. It was a qualitative results. I could look at that and I say there was a case to be made that that we should put in caps. If others look at it and say, no, there was no caps. The other thing I heard, we received 140 emails from residents through that period. And by 4-1, the residents were in favor of doing something. We decided to do nothing. And now this great country, the citizens acted, grassroots, they've delivered to us 30% of the electorate. And what I hear is the same proportion that we're receiving as emails to council, 80% of the people that they asked were in favor of doing something to limit short-term rentals. And now we're sitting here and we're saying that I don't support it, I don't believe it, when we support these people that come forward. How can you say that that's not enough to act? I just don't get it. I think we need to pass this. I don't think we should send it to referendum. I think, as some people have said, it'd be a disservice to the community to do that. We need to put this forward.
Dan.
Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. It's very important that we hear from the community so that we can act responsibly. My concern with a short-term rental cap is preserving our community. We have had an increase in short-term rentals recently. There have been articles. There was an article in the New York Times recently that has identified Charleston area beaches as a prime opportunity for investors to come and purchase short-term rentals. So we are no longer operating in a free market. All of our neighboring beach communities, except for I think one, have applied rental caps, so that we are the only one without a cap now, which is putting pressure on our community going forward that we haven't experienced in the past. So as much as I would like to learn from the past, I also recognize that things have changed. I'd like to read a little bit of the speech that I made to the state legislative committee that's considering removing all short-term rental caps in our state, because I think it really does, is pertinent for tonight. First of all, I think I speak for many of us here on the board and in the community that we love our short-term rentals. They pay for a good portion of our budget, but not all of it, because if that happened, we would lose our sense of community. Short-term renters don't run for public office or sit on our planning commission or on our zoning board or our water and sewer commission or join our churches or the exchange club. They visit, enjoy our hospitality, and then they leave. We are not talking about 1% or 4% or even 10% of our housing stock. Right now, we have almost 40% of our residents as short-term rentals, and that's climbing. Now, the question is whether it climbs or not, to me, is not a concern. 40% is a large portion of our housing stock. When do we become a community of renters with a few residents rather than a community of residents who have renters as well? If every home on the Isle of Palms is used to maximize short-term gains, which is what one of the arguments is, then something will be lost, not only for the people who live here, but also for those who visit. We believe it is our community that makes IOP a great place to live and visit, and we want to preserve that. I am voting for this ordinance because I believe that it's substantially good for the community, and we will be able to amend it to, as we go forward, to improve it so that it really does respond to all of our needs here.
Other, I'll spare you. Everybody said what I wanted to spare. Yeah, it's pretty late.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I've said many times before, to me, this is all about saving property rights. I believe that all present tonight would agree or argue that if this council tried to mandate that everybody had to rent their house, that wouldn't fall in favor. So if we can't mandate you can have to rent your house, how do we mandate that you can't rent your house? Mr. Mitchell brought up a couple of items about, rush to get licenses. If we pass first reading tonight, I'll be willing to bet there's going to be a big rush to go get the licenses, and I will be included in that rush. Lastly, again, we're picking winners and losers. 4%ers win, 6%ers lose, but property rights belong to all of them. So I cannot support this tonight, but I would support a referendum in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Just a couple of quick comments and then we'll go to the vote. If you look at just the headline numbers, and you can certainly draw conclusions, but if you look one layer below it, if you look at our single family homes, kind of to Blair's comment, our single family homes with a license is down year over year. Our 4%, I'm gonna sound like Mac with all these numbers here for a minute, but our 4% primary resident number is up over the last 12 years. And one more number with Mac real quick. Our 6% properties with a license is 1,549. About 840 of those are multifamily properties, to Blair's comment earlier. I've talked to a lot of you in this room, and I've talked to a lot of you not in this room, and I have spent many sleepless nights trying to get to a spot on this particular topic. I mean, it's making my hair fall out. I mean, look at it, would you? It's not an easy one at all. And you can stand up and say 30% is enough for us to take action. And I get it. Totally understand that. This is too big of an item to let 30% of our population decide what's best for this entire island. I do not feel. Are you done? almost, and we're gonna vote accordingly. I can tell you, if this thing was reversed, you would be up in our grill to send this to referendum and to not take action. So I think, let's not be too hypocritical and say we need to give 100% of our residents the vote on this. You know, we've had a number of comments, I've had a number of emails around, you know, non-resident owners wanting to be able to vote. That's not in our purview. That's a bigger issue than this pay grade for sure on who gets to vote as a primary resident. So the rules are what they are. Primary residents are the ones that vote here on IOP. You know, there's 4,500 of us roughly. I don't know where everybody's voting tonight, but if this goes to referendum, I think that's the right thing to let our residents, 100% of our residents, whether it's 30% turnout, 80% turnout, whatever the number is, have a voice on something this important on this island. So let's do a roll call vote, Nicole.
Can we, Mr. Mayor, can we go ahead and state the motion again?
We can. So the motion, John, I think you made it, is to adopt first reading of ordinance by petition 2023-12 to limit investment short-term rental business licenses to a maximum of 1,600. John, is that?
Contingent upon certification by Charleston County Board of Voter Registration and elections of signatures submitted.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry, see if Katie has a comment.
Councilmember Myers. Councilmember Bogosian.
Aye.
Councilmember Han.
Nay.
Councilmember Ward.
Nay.
Councilmember Pierce.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Streetman.
Nay.
Councilmember Popson.
Nay.
Mayor Pounds.
Nay.
Motion fails.
There being, so in essence, back to your point, that immediately takes it to referendum and we'll have it on the November ballot. Because we'll hit our September deadline. Assuming certification. There being no further business?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
30 seconds.